Test. 1, 2, 3. Are we on the air? Check. Test. Test. Ladies and gentlemen, a major earthquake has hit the city of San Francisco and much of Northern California. We have no further details at this time.
First accounts of this major quake indicate that the Oakland Bay Bridge has collapsed, but we have no further information at this time.
We are now activating the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.
Tuesday, October 17th began like most other days in the San Francisco Bay Area. Traffic on the highways was heavy. The streets of the city were busy as men, women, and children went about their normal daily routine. This day was destined to be different. It was a day that would literally change the lives of tens of thousands of Northern California residents. This is the story of the Great San Francisco Earthquake, not of 1906, but of 1989. This is the story of one group of people who, in the midst of the disaster, instantly mobilized for the purpose of giving aid and comfort to the thousands who so desperately needed help. This is the story of the Salvation Army and its mission and ministry to those whose lives had been negatively impacted by only 15 seconds in the passage of time. It was 5:04 p.m. A 50-foot section of the Oakland Bay Bridge collapses, and a 1 1/2 mile section of Interstate 880, the Nimitz Expressway, pancakes the upper deck onto the lower deck. Buildings throughout the city shake. Many experience extensive damage. A major fire breaks out in the Marina district of the city. The cities of Santa Cruz and Watsonville, south of San Francisco on the peninsula and on the edge of the epicenter, shake with a violence never experienced before as the ground literally opens up, swallowing everything in its path. Police, fire, and rescue crews begin responding, and so too do Salvation Army disaster teams throughout the area. Immediately, Salvation Army canteens are set up in 15 locations. Some are feeding the victims of disaster, while others are providing for the needs of the rescue workers. The Marina District, a fashionable neighborhood in the city of San Francisco, was especially hard hit. I talked with two sisters standing in line for food assistance. What brings you here today?
Well, we've had somewhat of a disaster here, and it's a little scary. So it's nice to have other people around and get some food. We have food, but we don't have any way of cooking it.
We can't cook it. We just made the rounds. I was up and down Chestnut trying to buy charcoal, and we just went to the Safeway, and they're closed. And we have food, but there's no way to prepare it.
What are the situations at the supermarkets in the Bay Area right now?
They're closed for the most part.
So people can't get food if they need it?
That's right. Correct.
It's only because we're known in the neighborhood. There's a couple of little local stores that are admitting people one by one if they know them to buy things, but they're running out of food. But the Safeway and places like that are closed. They don't have any electric power. Closed.
The Salvation Army's out in force today. We've been all over the Bay Area. This is our last stop. But what we have noticed is the Salvation Army literally has hundreds of volunteers. What do you think about that?
I think the Salvation Army is doing a great job. There are people who are in worse shape than we are. People behind us were talking about spending the night here because they don't have any place to live. And the Salvation Army is doing a great job. Thank you.
Yes, the Salvation Army is about the only organization to which I contribute. They consistently, over the years, prove to come through when there's a need. I'm an RN. I get to take care of people. And the Salvation Army surely helps us healthcare professionals do that.
Damage to buildings in the Marina was so extensive, many had to be immediately torn down because they were in imminent danger of collapse. In all, some 60 buildings were condemned and declared unfit for human habitation. While the Salvation Army stands by across the street, this building was torn down with all the victims' clothing and furniture still inside, as residents were not allowed to enter these badly damaged structures. The Salvation Army, minutes after the quake hit, established its command post at 850 Harrison Street, where many of the disaster efforts were coordinated. Major Chris Buchanan, second in command of the Salvation Army services in the area, assists in the overall coordination.
Carol Anderson is serving in the canteen at Senior Activity Center, has not been able to get to you because of the number of people that they're serving. People are coming and continue to come, and we're feeding them as much food as we possibly can. And they're cooking it and serving it as fast as they can, but we need more food, so keep sending it to the warehouse, 850 Harrison Street. Thanks a whole lot. You needed that update from Carol, she said, because I understand you're also sending in a relief team this afternoon for her and her crew. We're expecting perhaps 1,500 for dinner tonight. They're continuing to serve there to individuals who are coming to the center, and then we have volunteers that are hand carrying and delivering food to any number of other senior buildings, senior residence buildings in the area, where people are, for example, trapped up on the 10th floor, no elevators, and they're in wheelchairs. And the only way they're eating is because of the food we're bringing them. So keep supplying and keep sending us the people. We love it. It's great. Thank you.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the Bay Bridge, disaster services are in full gear. Standing with me right now is Lieutenant Irby of the Salvation Army in Concord, California. The lieutenant is in charge of disaster operations on the east side of the bay. Lieutenant, can you tell me just what is it that the Salvation Army is doing right now?
We have three main objectives here today. We are trying to help the bereaved right now with counseling. We've also set up a 24-hour unit for our missing persons, and then we're helping with victims and the workers, actually feeding them with the food.
How long have you been out here?
We started last night at about 7:30 out at Jack London Square, helping all the victims that were stuck in San Francisco trying to get across the bay. We served over 7,000 people last night alone. Then we switched our objective over to the Cypress incident, and where we're servicing basically the workers, trying to dig through the rubble and find out what they got there.
Lieutenant, can you tell me how many volunteers does the Salvation Army currently have working on this disaster in Oakland?
At the present time, we've recorded a little over 200 with us at this time.
And how many would you expect to arrive in the next day or so?
We expect probably at least another 150 to 200 throughout the weekend, and then who knows how many, depending on how long this disaster lasts.
Salvation Army personnel are arriving from all over the Pacific Northwest. Commissioner Paul Rader, newly appointed territorial commander for the Western United States, was one of the first to arrive from Los Angeles to tour the devastation.
We have people coming particularly from Southern California and also coming from the Oregon area, the Cascade region, who are bringing in emergency vehicles, canteens, foodstuffs, as well as personnel that are cooperating with those who are here on the job. Even though we have one of the best disaster relief and response teams in the whole of the United States based right here in Northern California.
Disasters know no economic boundaries when they hit. And this was also true for the earthquake and its victims. It has affected the rich and poor alike. Salvation Army efforts were also expanded in San Francisco's Tenderloin district, where scores of poor families were affected, most without food due to loss of home or utilities. The Salvation Army served thousands of meals to these residents who were most in need. They did so even under the most difficult of circumstances. Envoy Patrick Grenade explains.
In the Tenderloin, most of the Salvation Army services are focused in the complex of buildings behind me. We're housing 103 people upstairs, recovering alcoholics. They have to be clean and sober to stay. We're housing 60 people in our emergency shelter that goes on the other side of the building. And we're feeding 70 people at tables and about 1,000 people on the street each day since the earthquake has hit. All of this without any power until this morning. We lost our power at 5:04 when the earthquake struck on Tuesday evening. And we had operative power this morning, which is Thursday. At 7 o'clock, we were operating a coffee giveaway here and lunch program all day during the midday.
Throughout the disaster, the Salvation Army received and continues to receive the highest praise from rescue workers. The men and women who are charged with the responsibility of rescuing those missing at the Nimitz Expressway say it best. Can you tell me how important are the services of the Salvation Army to those of you who work in a disaster?
Salvation Army, if it wasn't for them, it would be very, as it is, it's very hard. Salvation Army just seems to make things go a lot smoother, and basically we couldn't function without their assistance. And a lot of these, disastrous, outcomes like this. As far as what I have seen, it looks pretty bad. I mean, I've seen cars no taller than maybe 1.5 feet, 2 foot tall that we were literally crawling by. So it does look pretty bad, but we're not giving up hope, whatsoever. We're planning on pulling some people out that are salvageable, hopefully.
If you were to send a message to the head of the Salvation Army, whoever he is, wherever he is, what would you say to him?
I'd say thank you very much and keep up the good work and do an outstanding job keeping people going that are trying to, pull out the rescue here.
The police department in a whole, no doubt the police, fire, and all the employees of the city help. But if we didn't have the Salvation Army and other agencies that could lend assistance to emergencies such as the disastrous earthquake here, ourselves, we couldn't handle the whole thing. The Salvation Army has come in and lend their services. We've had other volunteers throughout the city here ask where they can assist. We've recommended talking to the Salvation Army and other agencies through the city here.
Along with the loss of life and property, this disaster has taken an emotional toll on Northern California residents as well. Lieutenant Colonel H. Bruce Harvey, Northern California Divisional Commander, explains the Army's effort in this area.
We have in the East Bay a very well-established missing persons and crisis counseling group. We have just assigned a couple of Salvation Army officers to go to the coroner's office in the East Bay. From what we saw there a few hours ago, the process of taking the bodies of victims of the Cypress Freeway incident will begin, and we want trained Salvation Army minister officers on duty to assist in that counseling program. We are taking calls from family members from all over the world. They told us this morning they had calls at that office from England and Germany and all over the United States trying to find people. The communication from Watsonville and Salinas and Hollister is still almost non-existent. We get calls I had calls at my house last night at 11:30, I had another call at 2:30, I had another call at 3, I had a call at 5 a.m. That's the time of day that people can get to a phone and get out. We are not counting yet. We're just feeding everybody that comes to us. A major effort in the Salinas area, in Hollister, in Scotts Valley, in Los Gatos. We have canteens from as far away as Portland and Los Angeles, in addition to all of our canteens from this division. So we probably have 20 of these canteens in action today, and in every location they're feeding everybody that comes.
Although much of the media attention focused on San Francisco and the Bay Area, not to be forgotten was the devastation heaped upon Santa Cruz as the entire downtown shopping area was literally destroyed and thousands of residents displaced as their homes crumbled and slid from their foundations. Again, within minutes of the initial shake, the local Salvation Army Citadel became an immediate source of food, clothing, and shelter. And Salvation Army canteens traveled the dangerous mountain roads, bringing relief and aid to the remote and isolated areas in and around the actual epicenter. Watsonville, a small farming community populated largely by Hispanics, was shaken beyond belief. Again, the downtown was in shambles, and so many people were made homeless that several tent cities sprung up, populated with immigrant families, some of whom still had traumatic memories of the Mexico City earthquake. These residents refused to return to even the houses unaffected by the earth tremors. The Watsonville Salvation Army was on the job within minutes, opening the doors of their small community center, unaffected by the earthquake and yet in the center of the devastated area, to house, feed, and clothe many of the victims who were further hampered by their inability to speak English. With the help of local interpreters, this barrier was overcome and people were ministered to. At the invitation of the Salvation Army, the evangelist Billy Graham toured the entire stricken area, providing generous financial support for the Army's disaster relief efforts, but more importantly, providing spiritual counsel for the victims and rescuers alike. as he prayed with countless hundreds of people eager to share their grief and loss with this Christian leader. In 1906, the Bay Area was also hit with an earthquake that literally destroyed the city of San Francisco. The Salvation Army was on the scene at the time of the massive destruction, and they have been on the scene serving the needs of humanity ever since. For over 100 years, the Salvation Army in Northern California has been serving the overall needs of those who need its service the most. The elderly, the socially outcast, the youth and the homeless, the senior citizen and the down and out. Whoever, whatever. The Salvation Army stands ready to help people in their time of need. They are truly soldiers without swords. If you were to send a message to the head of the Salvation Army, whoever he is, wherever he is, what would you say to him?
I'd say thank you very much and keep up the good work.